17 hours in the cell before they came for me. I counted each one by the hymn that played through the Vox speakers embedded in the iron walls, a cycling devotional that repeated every 63 minutes. The Canticle of Absolution, arranged for massed voices and brass instruments, the kind they play in the great basilicas on shrine worlds, where pilgrims spend their last credits to die within sight of sacred bones. I knew the piece because I had audited the Ecclesiarchy's music distribution licenses for 3 years on Praetorius Secundus, tracking royalty payments to the estates of long-dead composers. Useless knowledge. The kind of information that clutters an administrator mind trained to notice discrepancies in spreadsheets rather than the discrepancies in the universe itself. The 17th hour brought the first change. Not a guard, not an interrogator, but a servitor that rolled through the pneumatic door on rubberized treads, its remaining organic eye filmed with cataracts, its mouth sewn shut with silver thread in a pattern I did not recognize. It carried a tray, water, protein paste, a stylus, a single sheet of parchment, cream-colored, high quality, the kind reserved for official correspondence between departmental heads. No instructions, no questions. The servitor departed with the same mechanical efficiency, and I was left staring at that blank page as if it might suddenly reveal the reason I had been dragged from my bunk aboard the transport vessel's sanctified margin and thrown into a cell I could not locate on any schematic I had ever processed. I did not write anything, not yet. The stylus felt like a trap, and I had learned enough about traps in my 47 years to recognize the shape of one even when I could not see its teeth. The auditing assignment had been routine, fleet provision discrepancies in Crusade Fleet Amaranthine, one of 4 major combat formations operating under the banner of the Crusaders of Eternal Vigil. The chapters. Zealotry was legendary across 3 sectors. Their hatred of the archenemy was so pure, so absolute, that even other space marines considered them extreme. They took no prisoners from tainted worlds. They burned libraries rather than risk corruption. They scarred their own flesh with litanies of hatred to keep their souls armored against whispered temptation. The Administratum had sent auditors to their fleet 17 times in the past century, and 16 of those auditors had returned with clean reports and nervous eyes. The 17th had not returned at all. I was the 18th. My supervisor, a woman named Castellana Vaughan, whose face I can still picture with perfect clarity even now, had handed me the assignment with what I mistook for sympathy. Routine discrepancy review, she had said, her voice carrying that particular flatness that senior administrators develop after decades of processing human suffering into numbered columns. Ammunition expenditure reports do not match production tithes. Either someone is skimming from the forges or the fleet is acquiring materiel from unlicensed sources, find out which. She had paused then, and I remember thinking that the pause was unusual. Castellana never paused. Her efficiency was the reason she had risen from a junior comptroller's assistant to deputy chief of the Munitorum Sector Audit Division. Be thorough, Corwin, but be careful with what you find. I had taken the warning as standard bureaucratic caution. I had been wrong about many things in my life, but never so catastrophically wrong as that. The hymn cycled again. I listened for variations, found none. The same voices, the same brass crescendo at the 47th minute, the same fading diminuendo as it approached the hour mark. My hands were steady as I picked up the stylus and began to write the report that no one would ever read. 3 weeks earlier, I had found the discrepancy that would end my career, my identity, and quite possibly my life. Not in the ammunition records, though those were certainly irregular. The Crusaders were expending bolt shells at a rate that suggested continuous major engagement, yet their combat reports showed only minor skirmishes against Orc raiders and the occasional Xenos patrol, millions of rounds unaccounted for, thousands of missiles, enough plasma cells to power a small city for a decade. Standard corruption, I had thought. A quartermaster selling surplus to black market traders, perhaps even a supply officer in league with rogue merchant capitals. I had seen such things before. But the discrepancy was not in the numbers. The numbers, I eventually realized, were a distraction. A lure placed by someone who understood how administratum auditors thought, someone who knew we would follow the numerical trail like hunting dogs following blood. The real discrepancy was in the routing codes. Every piece of cargo that moves through Imperial space carries a routing code, a 17-digit alphanumeric sequence that tracks its origin, destination, carrier, and authorization chain. I had processed perhaps 800,000 such codes in my career. I could read them the way a linguist reads ancient texts, spotting patterns that others would never notice. The ammunition bound for Fleet Amaranthine carried routing codes that originated from Forge World Metallica, proper and authorized, sanctioned by the Adeptus Mechanicus, and blessed by tech priests of appropriate rank. But the codes contained an anomaly, a single digit in the 7th position that should not have been there. The digit was a 3. In standard Mechanicus routing nomenclature, the 7th position indicates the classification of cargo: 1 for small arms, 2 for vehicle components, 4 for ship-grade weaponry, 5 for specialized ordnance, 6 through 9 reserved for Titan-class materiel and Mechanicus exclusive items. There is no classification. 3. The digit does not exist in the official taxonomy. I had searched every reference codex available to me, queried 3 separate cogitator networks, and found no mention of Category 3 in any legitimate documentation. I should have stopped there. I should have filed a request for clarification, forwarded my findings to the Departamento Munitorum's investigation division, and forgotten the whole matter. That is what a sensible auditor would have done. That is what Castellana had meant when she told me to be careful. Instead, I traced the routing code backward through 17 transit points, following it through cargo manifests and shipping ledgers and port authority records that spanned 6 systems and 40 years of documentation. The trail was cold and scattered, pieces of it corrupted by data decay, other pieces actively scrubbed from official records in ways that suggested deliberate intervention. But I was good at my job. I was very good at my job. The routing code I discovered originated not from Forge World Metallica but from a facility that official records claimed had never existed, a station designated only as Listening Post Omicron 7, located in a region of space that the Imperium's navigational charts showed as empty void. The manifest attached to the original shipment, partially recovered from a backup cogitator node that someone had failed to purge completely, listed the cargo not as ammunition but as reliquary materials, class Tertius, for immediate crusade fleet distribution. That was when I made my final mistake. I requested the original documentation from the Crusaders' own archives. The hymn changed. I sat up sharply, certain that I had miscounted, that fatigue and stress had corrupted my time sense the way data decay corrupts archived files. But no. The hymn had played for only 31 minutes before cutting off mid-phrase. The brass section strangled into silence, and what replaced it was not the canticle of absolution at all. This was older music, simpler, a single voice singing in a language I did not recognize, the melody carrying that particular ache of antiquity that suggested pre-imperial origin. The words meant nothing to me, but the tone was unmistakable. This was a lament, a mourning song. The cell door opened. He was not what I expected. I had prepared myself for a crusader, one of those towering figures in black ceramite whose hatred was legend, whose eyes burned with the fire of absolute conviction. Instead, the man who entered my cell was slight, elderly, dressed in the simple grey robes of an administratum senior clerk. His face was kind. That was what I noticed first. He had the sort of face that suggested patience and understanding, the face of a grandfather who might slip children extra sweets when their parents were not watching. "Corwin Ashfeld," he said, "not a question. I am going to tell you the truth." I said nothing. The stylus was still in my hand, the parchment before me covered in the careful notation that had consumed my professional life. Numbers, codes, the comfortable language of bureaucracy, which was also a kind of prayer, a faith in the idea that reality could be organized and measured and ultimately controlled. "You found the routing codes," the man continued. He did not sit, did not move to threaten me, simply stood in the center of my cell with his hands folded before him, like a priest preparing to deliver a sermon. You traced them back to their origin. You requested documentation that no auditor was ever meant to see. I am genuinely impressed. 17 predecessors failed where you succeeded. The 17th did not return. No. He smiled, and the smile did not reach his eyes. Auditor Bellamy Crane. He found the same trail you did. He made a different choice when he reached the end of it. What choice? The choice you are about to make. The old man gestured to the parchment before me. You have been writing a report. I would like to read it. I looked down at the page. My handwriting covered it in. Neat, precise lines. The result of decades of practice. Every letter formed according to the administratum's standard notation guidelines. I had written everything I knew. The routing codes, the phantom facility, the cargo classified under a category that should not exist. The conclusion I had reached, which even now seemed too monstrous to be true. You already know what it says. I know what you think it says. But perception and reality are not always aligned, Corwin. Sometimes what we discover is not the truth at all, but a carefully constructed version of the truth designed to test us, to see what we will do when confronted with information that challenges everything we believe. The morning song continued through the Vox speakers, that single ancient voice carrying its grief into every corner of the cell. I found myself listening for words I might recognize, patterns that might offer meaning, and found nothing but the pure distilled essence of loss. The Crusaders of Eternal Vigil, I said, the most zealous chapter in the Imperium, the ones who hate the archenemy so completely that they burn worlds to deny chaos a single foothold. They are not what they claim to be. And what do they claim to be? Servants of the Emperor, warriors against corruption, the pure and the righteous. The old man nodded slowly. Yes, that is their claim. And it is true, Corwin. Every word of it is true. But truth has layers, does it not? Your work has taught you that. A manifest can be accurate and still hide what matters. A ledger can balance and still conceal theft. The Crusaders serve the Emperor. They hate the archenemy. They are pure, as purity is measured in this fallen universe. Then explain the cargo, explain the routing codes, explain the shipments from a facility that officially does not exist, carrying materials classified under a category that no Mechanicus Codex recognizes. I cannot explain those things. He said it simply, without defensiveness, not because I am hiding them from you, but because explanation would require context you do not yet possess. What I can tell you is this. You have stumbled upon a secret that the Imperium has kept for 10,000 years, a secret that predates the heresy itself, a secret that, if revealed, would shatter the faith of billions and tear apart the very foundations of the ecclesiarchy's authority. My hand tightened on the stylus. The Crusaders have a pact with chaos. No. The old man's voice was gentle, almost pitying. That is what you were meant to believe. I remember the silence that followed. The morning song had ended, leaving only the faint hum of environmental systems, the distant throb of engines that told me I was still aboard a vessel, still traveling through the void toward a destination I did not know. The old man watched me with those kind eyes, and I realized with a slow dawning horror that his kindness was not performance. He genuinely believed he was helping me. The routing codes were planted, I said. The conclusion came to me with the clarity of mathematical proof, each piece falling into place with the same inevitability that had driven my entire career. Someone wanted me to find them. Someone wanted me to reach the conclusion I reached. The cargo, the phantom facility, the Category 3 classification. All of it was manufactured. Very good. But why? Why construct an elaborate false trail pointing to heresy among the most zealous servants of the throne? What possible purpose could such a deception serve? The old man finally sat. He lowered himself onto the edge of my cot with the careful deliberation of the elderly, his joints audibly protesting the movement. Up close, I could see the lines of his face in detail, the way age had carved channels in his skin like water eroding stone over centuries. There was something wrong with his eyes, I realized, something in the way the light reflected from them. Not augmetic replacement, something else. The Purpose, he said, is identification. The Imperium is vast, Corwin, 10,000 years vast, 1,000,000 worlds vast. In all that time, across all that space, there have been those who serve not the Emperor but themselves. Not chaos, not the archenemy, not the Xenos or the witch or the heretic. Simply themselves. Their own ambitions, their own hunger for power. And these people are the most dangerous enemies the Imperium has ever faced, because they wear the face of loyalty, while rotting everything they touch from within. You are describing corruption, standard corruption. The Administratum has protocols for identifying and eliminating corrupt officials. That is half of what we do. Standard corruption, yes. But what about extraordinary corruption? What about the corruption that wears the mask of righteousness so perfectly that even the mask wearer forgets it is a mask? What about the man who serves the Emperor with absolute sincerity and uses that sincerity as cover for crimes so vast they would make a daemon blush? How do you identify such a person, Corwin? How do you test whether a soul is truly pure or merely believes itself to be? I understood then. The understanding came not as revelation but as recognition, the way you might recognize a stranger's face in a crowd because they resemble someone you once knew. I had been tested. The routing codes, the phantom facility, the manufactured evidence of heresy, all of it had been placed before me like bait in a trap, waiting to see what I would do when I believed I had uncovered proof of corruption at the highest levels of imperial faith. You wanted to see if I would report what I found. We wanted to see what you would do with dangerous knowledge. Some auditors, when they find evidence of heresy, immediately alert their superiors. Proper protocol, proper faith. Some auditors, when they find such evidence, attempt to verify it independently, pursuing the truth regardless of the danger to themselves. Also proper, in its way, admirable even. But some auditors... He paused. The Vox speakers crackled with static, a brief burst of interference that resolved into what might have been words in a language I did not know, or might have been nothing at all. Some auditors, he continued, see such evidence as opportunity, not to expose corruption, but to exploit it. They realize that knowledge of heresy is a weapon, and weapons have value. They calculate how much a chapter master might pay to keep his secrets buried. They consider how far such leverage might advance their career. They become, in that moment of temptation, the very thing they believe they are hunting. I am not corrupt, no. The old man smiled again, and this time the smile reached his eyes, crinkling the weathered skin around them. You are not. You are exactly what your file suggests, a competent auditor with an overdeveloped sense of curiosity and an underdeveloped sense of self-preservation. You found the false evidence, and your response was to seek verification. Not to report, not to exploit, but to verify. You wanted the truth, Corwin. That is rarer than you might imagine. Then why am I in a cell? Why was I taken from my transport in the middle of the night, processed through what I assume is your detention facility, and left to wait 17 hours before anyone spoke to me? Because the test has a second phase. He reached into his robes and withdrew a data slate, the kind used for high-security documentation, its casing marked with seals I recognized as belonging to the Ordo Hereticus. My blood, already cold, seemed to freeze entirely. The Inquisition. I had been tested by the Inquisition. Bellamy Crane, the old man said, the auditor who did not return. He passed the first phase of the test, just as you did. He sought verification rather than exploitation. He wanted the truth. But when he received the truth, when he understood what he had actually uncovered, he made a choice that we could not. Permit to stand. What did he uncover? The same thing you are about to uncover. The old man offered me the data slate. The second phase of the test is not about what you do with false evidence. It is about what you do with real evidence. Evidence of something far worse than a Space Marine chapter's heresy. Evidence of a truth that the Imperium cannot survive knowing. I took the slate. Its surface was warm, as if someone had been holding it for hours, clutching it against their body. The activation rune pulsed with soft blue light. Behind me, through the walls of the cell, I heard the hymn begin again. But it was not the canticle of absolution this time, it was something else. something that contained within its harmonies a quality I could not name, a resonance that seemed to vibrate in the bones of my skull rather than the air around me. Before you read it, the old man said, "Understand this, there is no path back from this knowledge." Bellamy Crane read what you are about to read, and he believed it meant that everything he had served was a lie. He believed the Emperor himself was complicit in something unforgivable, and so he chose to spread that belief, to share what he had learned with anyone who would listen, because he thought the truth was more important than stability, more important than faith, more important than the survival of humanity itself. What happened to him? He is with us now. He's been with us for some time. When you hear him speak, you will understand why this test exists. The door opened again, and Bellamy Crane walked into my cell. I recognized him from his administratum identification holograph, the image attached to his personnel file that I had reviewed before departing on my own assignment. In the holograph, he had been a man of middle years, neither handsome nor plain, with the same careful neutrality of expression that all long-term administrators develop. The face before me now was the same face, but the expression was something I had never seen on any human being. He was smiling, not the careful smile of the old man, not the professional smile of a bureaucrat performing courtesy. This smile was radiant, transcendent, the smile of someone who had seen something so beautiful that the vision had burned away everything else, leaving only joy. "Corwin," he said. His voice was soft, almost singing. "You have no idea how long I have waited to share this with someone who might understand." The old man rose from the cot and moved toward the door. "I will leave you now. You have 1 hour to make your choice. At the end of that hour, you will either leave this cell as a servant of something greater than the Imperium, or you will not leave at all. The choice is entirely yours." He was gone before I could respond. The door sealed behind him with a hiss of pneumatic locks, and I was alone with Bellamy Crane and the data slate that contained the end of everything I believed. "Do not be afraid," Crane said. His smile never wavered. "I know what you are feeling. I felt it too when they first brought me here. The fear of what you might learn, the fear that everything you have built your life upon is a lie. But the truth is not something to fear, Corwin. The truth is liberation." "What truth?" "The truth about the Crusaders, the truth about the Emperor, the truth about what the Imperium actually is, beneath all the propaganda and the doctrine and the endless lies we tell ourselves to make existence bearable." He sat cross-legged on the floor, his robes pooling around him, still smiling that terrible, radiant smile. "The routing codes you found were real. They were not planted. They were not fabricated to test you. Everything you discovered is true. The old man said they were false evidence. The old man said many things. He is very skilled at saying things. It is his purpose, after all, to say things that make people believe whatever is necessary for them to believe." Crane laughed, and the laugh was as joyful as his smile, the sound of genuine delight. "Do you know what Category 3 cargo actually is, Corwin? Do you know what the Crusaders have been receiving from listening post-Omicron 7 for 4 decades? I looked at the data slate in my hands. The activation rune still pulsed. I had not yet opened the files. "Relics," Crane said. "Pieces of the Emperor himself. Not metaphorical relics, not symbolic tokens blessed by priests and placed in golden shrines. Actual physical pieces. Bone fragments, preserved tissue, samples of blood that has remained liquid for 10,000 years despite every law of biology and chemistry. The Crusaders have been receiving these relics and doing something with them that the ecclesiarchy would never sanction, something that the Inquisition itself has worked for millennia to prevent anyone from discovering. What are they doing? They are testing them, analyzing them, trying to understand what the Emperor actually was." Crane leaned forward, his eyes bright with fervor. "And they have succeeded, Corwin. They know the truth. The routing codes you found, the cargo manifests, the records from the Phantom facility, they are all part of a project that has been running since the heresy itself, a project to answer the only question that truly matters: is the Emperor a god?" The hymn through the Vox speakers shifted again, and I realized with sick certainty that the music was responding to the conversation. Someone was listening, someone was orchestrating. "The answer," Crane said, "is no. The Emperor's not a god. He was never a god. He was something far more terrible, a weapon, created by humanity in the age of technology to fight a war against something that no longer exists, programmed with directives that no longer apply, running on systems that have been corrupted by 10,000 years of decay and desperation. The faith of the ecclesiarchy, the worship of billions upon billions of souls, is not fuel for divine power. It is interference, static, noise that corrupts the Emperor's original purpose and turns him into something he was never meant to be. That is heresy. Yes. Crane's smile widened. That is what I thought too when I first read the files. I thought, this is a test, an elaborate deception, a trap designed to identify those whose faith can be shaken by lies. I spent days convincing myself that nothing I had read was true, that the evidence had been manufactured, that my captors were agents of chaos seeking to corrupt me through doubt. But then they showed me the proof, Corwin. They let me see one of the relics. They let me touch it. His hand rose, and I saw for the first time that his fingers were damaged, not cut or burned, but warped, twisted into shapes that no natural hand could form, as if the bones beneath the skin had been remade according to principles that defied human anatomy. He flexed the fingers, and they moved with fluid grace despite their wrongness. When you touch divinity, he said, it touches you back, it changes you, not corrupts, changes. I am not a servant of chaos, Corwin. I am not a heretic or a traitor or any of the things the Imperium would call me. I am simply someone who has touched the truth and been transformed by it. And now I understand. Now I see what the Crusaders have known for decades, what the Inquisition has fought to suppress, what the old man was sent here to prevent you from ever learning. What do you see? The Emperor is dying. Crane's voice dropped to a whisper, not the slow death of a god sustained by faith, the final death of a machine whose power source is failing. In perhaps a century, perhaps less, the Astronomicon will go dark. The Imperium will be blind. Humanity will be scattered and alone in a universe that has been waiting for this moment since before our species learned to make fire. And the Crusaders? They are trying to save him. Not through faith, not through prayer, but through the one thing. That might actually work. Understanding what he truly is and repairing the damage before it becomes fatal. They are the most zealous servants of the throne because they know what is actually at stake. Their hatred of chaos is not religious fervor. It is operational necessity. Every daemon destroyed, every cultist purged, every corrupted world burned, is a reduction in the interference that prevents them from completing their work. I stared at the data slate in my hands. The files inside would confirm or deny everything Crane had said. I could open them and know, or I could refuse, could choose ignorance, could let the old man return and tell him that I wanted no part of this, that I would forget everything I had heard and return to my life as an auditor of ammunition expenditure reports. Bellamy, I said carefully, the old man told me that you chose to spread this knowledge, that you tried to share what you had learned. I did. I thought people deserved to know. I thought the truth was more important than the comfortable lies we tell ourselves. And now you are here, in this cell, smiling as if you have found paradise. I have found something better than paradise. He held up his twisted hand again. I have found purpose. When I touched the relic, Corwin, it did not just change my flesh. It gave me something, a fragment of understanding, a piece of the Emperor's original purpose, his original programming, downloaded into my mind like data into a cogitator. I know now what I am meant to do. I know what humanity is meant to do. Not worship, not pray. Work, serve the function we were created to serve in the war that never actually ended. What war? Crane's smile flickered for the first time. Something passed across his face, a shadow of the man he had been before his transformation. And in that shadow I saw something that looked very much like fear. The war against what made us, he said, the enemy that created humanity as a weapon and then tried to destroy. So when we became too dangerous to control, the enemy that is still out there beyond the light of the Astronomicon, waiting for the Emperor to finally fail so it can reclaim what it built. The hymn through the Vox speakers rose to a crescendo, and I realized that I was hearing words now, words in a language that no human throat had ever been designed to speak. The music was not music at all. It was communication, a signal being broadcast through the Vox system using frequencies that registered to human ears as harmony and melody but carried meaning far beyond anything our auditory processing could consciously interpret. I opened the data slate. The files were exactly what Crane had described: cargo manifests, routing codes, scientific analyses of biological samples that matched no known organic template in any Imperial database. Genetic sequences that contained mathematical relationships too precise to be natural, too complex to be artificial, existing in a category that should not be possible. Reports from tech priests who had examined the relics and emerged speaking in tongues that no linguist could translate. Testimonies from crusaders who had undergone exposure protocols and developed capabilities that defied the laws of physics as the Imperium understood them. And at the bottom of the files, a single image, the relic itself, a fragment of bone no larger than my thumb, suspended in a stasis field that glowed with light that was not light, that existed in colors that human eyes had no names for. Even in the flat reproduction of a pict capture, it was beautiful. The most beautiful thing I had ever seen. The most beautiful thing anyone had ever seen. I wanted to touch it. I needed to touch it. The desire rose in me like thirst, like hunger, like the desperate gasping need for air that comes when you have been held underwater too long. You feel it, Crane said, even through the image, even through all the layers of reproduction and translation and technological mediation. The signal reaches you. The purpose calls to you. This is what it means to be human, Corwin. Not the weakness and the fear and the endless scrabbling for survival in a hostile universe. Connection, function, the fulfillment of the design we carry in every cell of our bodies, waiting to be activated. I dropped the data slate. It clattered against the floor of the cell and the image winked out, and suddenly I could think again. Suddenly the desire was gone, replaced by cold, clear terror. The relic is a weapon, I said, not a holy artifact, not proof of the Emperor's nature, a weapon designed to compromise anyone who perceives it. The Crusaders have not discovered a truth. They have been corrupted by something that uses truth as a delivery mechanism. Crane's smile did not waver. Is there a difference? Truth that transforms you is still truth. Understanding that changes you is still understanding. The weapon you describe and the revelation I experienced are the same thing viewed from different perspectives. The old man. He was testing me, not to see if I would be corrupted by false evidence, but to see if I could resist being corrupted by real evidence. The first phase was the routing codes, the second phase is you, yes. Crane spread his twisted hands, and now you must choose, accept the signal, open yourself to the purpose that waits inside you, join us in the work that humanity was created to perform, or resist, cling to the lies that have sustained you for 47 years. Leave this cell as the same frightened auditor who entered it, carrying the knowledge of what you refused but never the freedom that comes from acceptance. What happens if I refuse? Then you forget. He said it simply, without threat. The old man has techniques, methods of removing memory that leave no trace, no scar tissue, no sense of loss. You will return to your life believing that your audit of Fleet Amaranthine found nothing unusual. You will file a clean report. You will continue counting ammunition expenditure until the day you die, never knowing what you almost became. I thought about my life. 47 years of service to the Administratum, 3 promotions, 2 commendations, a small hab unit on a station orbiting a world whose name I had never bothered to learn, no family, no friends, not really, colleagues who knew my efficiency ratings and nothing else. A career built on the careful analysis of numbers, the obsessive pursuit of discrepancies, the belief that truth was something that could be measured and documented and filed in triplicate. What had that life given me? What had I built? What would remain when I was gone? The hymn shifted again, and this time I recognized what I was hearing, the canticle of absolution, but changed, altered. The same melody carried on the same brass instruments, but the words had been replaced with something else, something that used the familiar structure as scaffolding for a message I could almost understand. How many? I asked. Crane tilted his head. How many what? How many auditors have been tested here? Not 17, not 18, the real number. His smile flickered again, and again I saw that shadow of fear cross his features. I do not know. Hundreds, perhaps, thousands. The testing has been ongoing for centuries. And how many accepted? How many chose to receive the signal? All of them. He said it with absolute certainty. Every single one who made it to the second phase. The signal is persuasive. Once you perceive it, resistance becomes very difficult. The old man's techniques are effective, but they cannot erase what the signal has already written. Anyone who receives the full transmission, who sees the relic clearly, who hears the frequency without interference, they accept. They must accept. It is not mind control, Corwin. It is completion. The signal fills a void that has existed in humanity since the moment of our creation. And once that void is filled, the idea of returning to emptiness becomes unthinkable. Then why test us at all? Why not simply expose everyone to the signal and let it do its work? Crane's smile faded entirely. For the first time, he looked uncertain, because the signal does not work on everyone. There are some whose emptiness is a different shape, some who carry a void that the signal cannot fill. The testing identifies them, separates them. The first phase eliminates the corrupt, those who would exploit what they learn. The second phase reveals those who are incompatible, those who perceive the signal but feel nothing, those who see the relic and experience no desire at all. What happens to them? They become weapons. Crane's voice dropped to a whisper, against the enemy that made us. The war requires soldiers who can engage the enemy directly without being compromised by exposure. The compatible serve by spreading the signal, by preparing humanity for its function. The incompatible serve by fighting. Neither role is lesser, both are necessary. I stood. The data slate remained on the floor, its screen dark, its secrets temporarily contained. Crane watched me with eyes that held the same terrible radiance as his earlier smile. You are incompatible, he said. I can see it in you. The signal reached you through the image, and you felt the desire, but you were able to resist, to drop the slate, to think clearly despite the transmission. That is extremely rare, Corwin, extremely valuable. The door opened. The old man stood in the frame, his kind face carrying an expression I could not read. Corwin Ashfeld, he said, have you made your choice? I looked at Crane, at the twisted fingers that moved too fluidly, at the joy that had consumed him so completely that nothing of the original man remained. He was happy, genuinely happy. More content than I had ever seen any human being in my entire 47 years. I looked at the old man, at his careful kindness, at the eyes that reflected light in ways that suggested he was no longer entirely human either. I looked at the data slate on the floor, at the files that contained evidence of something I could never unsee. The Crusaders, I said slowly, they have not made a pact with chaos. They have made a pact with something else, something older, something that created both humanity and the enemy's humanity has been fighting since before we had names for them. Yes, the old man nodded. And that pact requires soldiers, warriors who can resist the signal that compromises everyone else, fighters who can walk into the heart of the enemy's domain without being turned into weapons against their own kind. The heresy was never heresy. It was camouflage. The Crusaders' zealotry, their hatred of chaos, their willingness to burn worlds rather than risk corruption, all of it is cover for a war that the Imperium cannot know is being fought. Yes, and the Emperor, the God-Emperor of mankind, he is not dying, he is waiting, regenerating, preparing for the moment when the war enters its final phase. The old man smiled. It was the same smile Crane wore, but without the radiance. A practiced smile, a professional smile. The Emperor is many things, he said. A weapon, a beacon, a general, a lie that sustains 1 trillion souls who need to believe in something greater than themselves. What he is not, and never was, is a god. Gods answer prayers. Gods grant miracles. Gods care about the suffering of their worshippers. The Emperor is a machine, Corwin, a very old, very powerful, very damaged machine, running on faith because his original power source was destroyed 10,000 years ago. The signal you heard, the purpose you felt calling to you through that image, was not divine revelation. It was a system diagnostic, a query sent out by a machine seeking compatible components. And I am compatible, you are resistant, which is far more useful. The old man stepped into the cell. Come with me, Corwin. Ashfeld. Let me show you what the Crusaders have been building in the hidden places of the Imperium. Let me show you the weapons we have forged against the enemy that made us. Let me show you what humanity was always meant to become. I did not ask about the alternative. I did not ask what would happen if I refused. I knew. The same techniques that could erase memory could erase a person entirely. The old man's kindness was genuine, but it was the kindness of someone who had made peace with necessary cruelty long ago. I walked out of the cell. Crane remained behind, still sitting cross-legged on the floor, still smiling that transcendent smile. The door sealed behind me. What happens to him? I asked. He serves his function. He welcomes the compatible, helps them understand what they are becoming, gives them context for the transformation they are about to undergo. And the incompatible? The ones like me? You will be trained, augmented, given tools that will allow you to fight enemies that no normal human could survive encountering. The war has many fronts, Corwin. The Crusaders fight the obvious battles, the ones that the Imperium sees and celebrates. But there are other battles, fought in places that no map shows, against opponents that no cogitator can categorize. Those battles require soldiers who can think clearly in the presence of signals designed to subvert all human cognition. We walked through corridors I did not recognize, past doors marked with symbols I had never seen in any imperial codex. The hymn still played through unseen vox speakers, but I could no longer hear it as music. I heard the data beneath the melody, the information encoded in the frequencies, the instructions being transmitted to everyone who listened, everyone who had not yet learned to filter the signal from the noise. The truth, I said, the truth I was supposed to learn. That was part of the test as well, was it not? Not just whether I would resist the signal, but whether I could understand what the signal meant, what the Crusaders were actually doing, what the war actually is. Yes. The old man paused before a massive door, black iron inscribed with geometric patterns that seemed to shift when I looked at them directly. And now you understand. The truth about the Crusaders' pact, the truth about the Emperor, the truth about humanity's purpose. Do you believe it? I thought about the question, thought about everything I had seen and heard since waking in that cell 17 hours ago, thought about the relic in the image, the beauty that had almost consumed me, the desire that still lurked somewhere beneath my conscious thoughts, waiting to resurface. I believe something happened to me in that cell, I said carefully. I believe the signal is real and dangerous, and that my resistance to it makes me valuable to whoever is running this operation. But belief in the truth of what I was told, that requires evidence, verifiable evidence, the kind that cannot be fabricated or manipulated by people with access to the resources you clearly possess. The old man laughed. It was a genuine laugh, warm and surprised. You truly are a bureaucrat, Corwin Ashfeld. Even now, even after everything, you want documentation. I want to understand what I am becoming, what I am going to fight, what victory looks like and what defeat costs. Then you will have your documentation. He placed his hand on the door, and the geometric patterns flared with light that cast no shadows. Beyond this point, you cease to be an auditor. You cease to be a citizen of the Imperium. You cease, in some ways, to be human at all. You become a weapon in a war that began before humanity evolved language, against an enemy that invented us as a tool and has spent millions of years regretting that decision. Are you ready? I looked back down the corridor. Somewhere behind me, Bellamy Crane sat in his cell, radiant with joy, waiting for the next compatible soul to receive his testimony. Somewhere behind me, a data slate lay on a cold floor, containing evidence of truths I could never verify and lies I could never distinguish from reality. Somewhere ahead of me, there was a war, a purpose, a function I had been designed to serve in a conflict older than stars. I had spent 47 years counting ammunition, tracking discrepancies, believing that the universe could be organized and measured and ultimately controlled. Now I would learn how wrong I had been. Open the door. The patterns blazed and the door swung wide, and the hymn that had been playing since my arrival changed one final time. I heard it clearly now, not the canticle of absolution, not a morning song, not a signal or a test or a trap, a welcome, sung in frequencies that human ears were never meant to process, in a language that human minds were never meant to understand, by voices that had been waiting since before humanity took its first breath. I walked through the door, and the truth swallowed me whole, and whatever emerged on the other side wore my face but no longer answered to my name. The administratum would mark me as lost, missing during an audit assignment, presumed dead, file closed and archived per standard protocol. Another statistic in the endless ledgers of the Imperium. They would not be entirely wrong. What they would never know, could never know, was that Corwin Ashfeld had found something far more valuable than evidence of ammunition theft. He had found the answer to a question the Imperium had been forbidden to ask since the moment of its founding. What is humanity for? The door sealed behind me, the hymn continued, and somewhere in the void between stars, in places that no navigational chart would ever record, the war that never ended entered its next phase.